Your blessings will read some verses from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita today, chapter 10 of the Adi-lila, verses 121 and 122. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrindam. So verse 121 is on the board. Gauda Desha Bhakti Rakaila Sangshipa Katana Gauda Desha Bhakti Kaila Sangshipa Katana Ananta Chaitanya Bhakta Naya Ganana Ananda Chaitanya Bhakta Naya Ganana Gauradesha Bhakti Kaila Sangshipa Katana Ananta Chaitanya Bhakta Naya Ganana Synonyms: Gauradesha in Bengal, Bhaktira of the devotees, Kaila I have described, Sangshepa in brief, Katana narration, Ananta unlimited, Chaitanya Bhakta devotees of Lord Chaitanya, Na not, Yaya can be, Ganana counted. Translation: I have given a brief description of the devotees of Lord Chaitanya in Bengal. Actually, his devotees are innumerable. And since there is no purport to this verse, we'll read the next one, 122. Actually, it was the purport to this verse that somehow rather forced me to concede, to end up here, because it's such an ecstatic commentary. It's very short, but when I read it, I said, well, I've got to, at least for my own purification, discuss it with devotees, because it's ecstatic. Anyway, I'll read it and you will see it for yourself. Nilachale Saba Bhakta Prabhus Nilachale Saba Bhakta Prabhu Sange Duistane Prabhu Seva Kaila Nanarangi. Translation: I have especially mentioned all these devotees because they accompanied Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Bengal and Orissa and served him in many ways. Purport: most of the devotees of Lord Chaitanya lived in Bengal and Orissa, thus they are celebrated as Uriyas and Gaudiyas. Now the state of Orissa is renamed as Odisha, I think it's named now. So it's instead of Uriyas, it's Odishas and Gaudiyas. At present, however, Srila Prabhupada continues, by the grace of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his cult is being propagated all over the world, and it is most probable that in the future history of Lord Chaitanya's movement, Europeans, Americans, Canadians, Australians, it's right here in purport, South Americans, Asians, and people from all over the world will be celebrated as devotees of Lord Chaitanya. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness has already constructed a big temple in Mayapur, Navadvip, which is being visited by devotees from all parts of the world, as foretold by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and anticipated by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So this is the ecstatic commentary of Srila Prabhupada. And I read the verses again. Translations: I have given a brief description of the devotees of Lord Chaitanya in Bengal. Actually, his devotees are innumerable. I have especially mentioned all these devotees because they accompanied Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Bengal and Orissa and served him in many ways. Om Agyanat Simrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksaram Militamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutalya Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandiham Shri Guru Shri Yudapada Kamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadatam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishwakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavareshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhishcha Kripa Sindhu Nirvacha Patidanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavani Paschyate Desha Tarine Mukam Karoti Vatanam Pangam Nagayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. Just a few months ago we had an online conference call with His Grace Rameshwara Prabhu, a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, one of his stalwarts, devotees who Srila Prabhupada put a lot of trust upon and empowered for propagating his movement in the West. And specifically, he was empowered to help Srila Prabhupada print his transcendental books, and even more specifically, he was in charge of that transcendental marathon that Srila Prabhupada involved devotees in by forcing them to produce how many volumes? 17 volumes of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in 2 months. And Rameshwara Prabhu, when he was talking about that particular marathon, we asked him to speak on the topic of printing and distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. He became not animated, not inspired, he became ecstatic. His voice choked up, his eyes swelled with tears, and he could hardly speak when he was describing the experience they went through when Srila Prabhupada gave him and them, that stern order, you must produce Chaitanya Charitamrita within 2 months. And the realization that Rameshwara Prabhu shared with us when he was able to speak was that Srila Prabhupada managed to condense, crystallize the highest realm of devotional service, the highest realm of the spiritual world, the transcendental pastimes of Shri Radha Krishna, and the most ecstatic emotions they exchange in those relationships, in separation. He managed to distill and crystallize them and put them into his commentaries, so much that when they worked on these commentaries, he said, we stopped eating, we stopped sleeping, we didn't do any of those things. All these bodily necessities stopped being necessary for us. All we could think about and all we could do was swimming in the nectar of these commentaries and producing them, and we still don't understand how we managed to do that. And he was so ecstatic. He said that everything Prabhupada had in his heart, he put into these commentaries. And we shouldn't be bewildered and misled by the ostensible simplicity of his commentaries and the ostensible simplicity of Chaitanya Charitamrita itself. Once Shivaram Maharaj, one of the great spiritual leaders of our movement, a very learned devotee who's been reading Prabhupada's books for over 50 years, and he has read Chaitanya Charitamrita, from what I remember, 10 or 15 times, maybe even 20 times, maybe even more. I don't know how he managed to read the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita 20 times, besides the other books he read and wrote. But somehow or other, when he was asked, when someone reads a book 20 times, he must have gotten it right. He must have gotten some essence of that book that he could easily share with us. So he was asked by one devotee, his godbrother, so Maharaj, now that you've read Chaitanya Charitamrita so many times, what's the bottom line? What's the essence? The essential oil that you've distilled from the Chaitanya Charitamrita? And he said, well, there is a lot of eating going on in Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's the bottom line. They eat a lot of prasadam. And again, that seems to be very simplistic. What is that? The highest, because again, Chaitanya Charitamrita is a postgraduate study of spiritual life. We have the Bhagavad Gita, a very complex and exquisite philosophy with a lot of commentaries. And then we have Srimad Bhagavatam, which is called I think called Vidyavati, the highest limit of knowledge. There is a saying among Sanskrit Pandits in India that if you want to test your knowledge, read Srimad Bhagavatam. You'll be put to shame with your knowledge, because Bhagavatam cannot be understood by mundane knowledge. And then Chaitanya Charitamrita is on top of that. And the highest realization Shiva Maharaj has extracted from that book is that there is a lot of eating going on and chanting, singing and dancing. So how do we understand that? There is an interesting explanation for that given by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. I'll read it quoted from his direct words. He says, a Pandita who apparently considered chanting Harinam an elementary practice for neophyte spiritualists asked, why are you chanting Harinama so much? He asked Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati replied with the example of a young child when he first learns to write ABC at the age of 5. We are taught how to form letters A, B, C. When he is older, he is writing ABC in an algebra equation. And his grandmother walks over and looks over his shoulder, and she may ask him, why is he still studying at the same level as when he was 5 years old, the same letters A, B, C? She doesn't see that what appears to be the same exercise is actually on a significantly higher platform. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur then concluded by saying, chanting Hare Krishna is postgraduate dharma. And the same is taking prasadam with devotees and distributing prasadam. And discussing Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is translated by Srila Prabhupada, the title Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is translated as what's the nature of the living force in eternity, something like that, right? The activity of the living force, Chaitanya Charitamrita in eternity. What do they do in the spiritual world? The same as we're doing here. Just like Nick Prabhu has been leading this ecstatic kirtan. I was here and I was thinking, I wish this kirtan never ends. unfortunately it ended. But that's what's going on in the spiritual world. They chant, they hear about Krishna, and they pursue him eternally. And us describing or discussing philosophy and trying to learn practices of devotional service and trying to follow regulative principles, we're in a preparatory class, trying to qualify for that eternal activity which will continue forever. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains, this is a postgraduate dharma. Just as you are never weary of calling your children's names every day, when we chant the names of Krishna with love, we don't become jaded. Namaganesa Daruchi devotees are characterized by increasing, unceasing taste for reciting the holy names. So that's what Chaitanya Charitamrita is about. So much so that Srila Prabhupada once told Tamal Krishna Maharaj that even if people do not accept Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is God, first of all, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself never made it a condition, a stipulation for people to progress spiritually by joining his Sankirtana movement. It was his devotees who were trying to force him to admit that he was God somehow. And as much as he was resisting and he was reluctant, he had to accept on a few occasions and reveal his divine nature. But otherwise, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu never insisted on being accepted as God. He actually tried to forget that he was God. He would block his ears when people were referring to him as Krishna. Sanatana Goswami, by different tricks, tried to corner Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when they were discussing different avatars of the Lord. And when Lord Chaitanya quoted Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna Varnam Tvisha Krishnam Sangopam Gastra Parshadam Yagyah Sankirtana Prayarya Janti Sumedasaha, he said, this is the description of the avatar of Krishna in the age of Kali. Sanatana Goswami, before he was able to move on, Sanatana Goswami said, just wait a minute, I want to get it right. So he's Krishna Varna. By his Varna, he's Krishna. By his, you could say, caste or his classification, he belongs to the caste of Krishna. And his Krishna Varna means also that his Varna, his color is Krishna. Also, Krishna Varna means Krishna Varnaiti, means that he always chants Hare Krishna. And also Krishna Varna means that he forces other people or inspires or enthuses them to chant Hare Krishna. And the last explanation is that Krishna Varna means that he reveals himself as Krishna to his fortunate devotees. So there's so much meaning in these two words, Krishna Varna. And then Tvisha Akrishnam, which is a very tricky compound word. Depending on how you break it up, it could mean either Krishna Tvisha Krishnam or Krishna Tvisha Akrishnam, which means that he's by his effulgence, he's Krishna or Krishna, by his bodily complexion. So Sanatana Goswami said, do I understand it right that he's Krishna, but he appears golden, and then he's surrounded by his Samgopangastra Parshadam, his very close, intimate associates, his companions and his devotees, Sangopangastra Parshadam, and some of them function as his weapons. Lord Chaitanya Prabhu came unarmed, weaponless. That's why he holds his hands up. See, I don't have any weapons. Don't be afraid, come close. But he, of course, is being a little bit tricky with us because he does have his weapons, concealed weapons, right? Sometimes special agents have concealed weapons, and his two weapons that he concealed are his mercy and his beauty, and also his devotees. And so he's surrounded by his devotees always, and he always chants Hare Krishna, Yai Sankirtana Prayari, and he is worshipped primarily by chanting the holy name Sankirtana. Is that correct? Do I get it right? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could see through the trickery, and he said, okay, Sanatana Goswami, give up your tricks, let's move on to Manvantaras and discuss them. Which was an admission on his part, as much of an admission as you could get from him, right? So his devotees that come with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are empowered by Lord Chaitanya to such an extent that they themselves perform and accomplish tasks that even he was not able to perform. And Srila Prabhupada indicates that, not indicates, but actually speaks it, writes it straightforwardly in his commentary on the 5th verse of the 19th chapter of the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 6.19.5, another ecstatic commentary where Prabhupada writes that Lord Krishna, he sometimes depends on his devotees for different tasks. Sometimes Lord Krishna is buried in the ground, in earth, and he, as if he was unable to get out by himself, he asks his devotees in a dream, could you please dig me out? Could you please clean me and worship me? Sometimes Lord Krishna comes to his devotee and tells him or her, please feed me, I am hungry, as if he cannot procure his own food for himself. Sometimes Lord Krishna asks his devotee in a dream, could you please restore my temple or my garden because they don't please me any longer. They have fallen in disrepair, so please repair them and make them pleasing for me. Actually, once Srila Prabhupada was asked by an Indian visitor, it was in Allahabad, I think, during the Kumbh Mela, and Prabhupada was holding a program, and one Indian gentleman asked Prabhupada a question, because by that time Prabhupada had already constructed a few temples in India and in the West, of course. So the gentleman asked Srila Prabhupada, Swamiji, why do you need to construct your own temples? There are so many old temples in India that need to be restored and renovated. Why do you waste money on building new temples? It's a very intelligent question, isn't it? A difficult one too. How would you answer that? And Prabhupada asked him a question in return. He said, do you have a wife? He said, yes, I do. Do you have children? Yes, I do. How many children do you have? 3. Why do you need your own children? There are so many orphans in the street. Just adopt some. You can adopt some children in the street. Why do you need your own? The man got the answer. It's a matter of love. So Prabhupada was referring to his efforts to build temples as a matter of love, as service to Krishna. So sometimes Krishna appears in a dream to a devotee and asks him to build or renovate a temple. And then Srila Prabhupada says something very significant. In the same way, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sometimes asks his devotees to distribute, to spread his name and mission all over the world, as if he is unable to do it himself. And considering all these points, and significantly Prabhupada says in a singular, sometimes Lord Chaitanya asks his devotee, singular, to spread his name and fame all over the world, as if he cannot do it himself. And considering all these points, Prabhupada concludes, the most important aspect of the Supreme Lord's self-sufficiency is that he always depends on his devotees. That's his self-sufficiency, and that's his causeless mercy. So when Prabhupada writes in this ecstatic commentary that the cult of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will be spread all over the world, and in the future devotees from, I'll read the list again, Europeans, Americans, Canadians, Australians, South Americans, Asians, and people from all over the world. Somehow Russians have been missed out. I don't know. Left out of this commentary. But anyway, and Germans and Russians have been the ones who were predicted by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Prabhupada refers in his commentary to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who anticipated the advent of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's era in the world, that he said Russians and Prussians, or Russians and Germans will come and congregate in Navadvip and chant the names of Sri Sachinandana together. And the same Srila Prabhupada also referred to a prediction by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and I can read the prediction. It's in Chaitanya Mangala. And again, when you read these words by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, spoken by him personally, you cannot help but understand very clearly who Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was referring to. He says, let me see. Yeah. There's so much to read, actually. Where is that? Krishna Chaitanya. Anyhow, I remember what is said there, but I really want to get it. I want to read it verbatim for you. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Yeah. In Chaitanya Mangala, Sutra Kanda, Song 12, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Ebinama Sankirtana Tikshna Khadga lana antara asura jivera pheli bakatiya yadi papi chhadi dharma dura deshiyaya mora senapati bhakta yaibe tathai. Taking the sharp sword of the congregational chanting of the holy name, I will root out, it's another weapon, the chanting of Krishna's names. I will root out and destroy the demonic mentality in the hearts of the conditioned souls. And then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, if some sinful people escape the purge and giving up religious principles, go to far-off countries, if they flee and go to far-off countries, and there is no further country from India than America, it's exactly on the opposite side of the world, of the globe, then my commander-in-chief, Senapati Bhakta, the general of my army, will appear to chase them and distribute Krishna consciousness. It's right there. If some unfortunate sinful people flee and go to the other distant countries, escaping my mercy, my Senapati Bhakta will get them. He'll chase them. And you could see, if you see, there is one devotee who compiled an animation of Prabhupada's travels across the world. There's a map, and Srila Prabhupada is marked by a dot that travels across the map. And you can see how Prabhupada chases us and travels across the map over and over again, 11 or 12 times, going to different countries, sometimes change the course, taking a very sharp turn, all of a sudden changing the course of his travels to get to some other countries and save those devotees. And in that, he is not, the difference between Srila Prabhupada's role and that of Senapati or general. Usually generals do not concern themselves with rescuing individual participants in their battles. They have strategic goals. They cannot really busy themselves with saving or being concerned with individuals. But that's different with Srila Prabhupada. Listen to this, and this is a conversation that Srila Prabhupada had in Australia, in Melbourne. In Melbourne in 1976. Yeah, 1976. In Melbourne on the 24th of April, almost to the day, right? 24th of April, Srila Prabhupada in 1976 had the following exchange, the following conversation with one lady who asked him a question after the class. He gave a class, and then one lady named Tanya, T-A-N-I-A, Tanya. She asks, Srila Prabhupada, would you please explain why Krishna consciousness hadn't come to the West until now? Why it hasn't come earlier? A good question. Let's listen to how Prabhupada answers this question. He says, because you were not born yet. After your birth, we have come here to take you back to home, back to Godhead. Now you take the opportunity, come with us. We were waiting for your birth. For every one of us. Like that. So, as it is explained in these two verses, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami sums up a large section of this chapter. He continues it after this. Before he was describing devotees in Bengal and Orissa, and each and every one of these devotees had a very special, very, very unique relationship with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the specific devotees I wanted to refer to, the 45th branch of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's tree, are Rupa and Sanatana Goswami. Yeah, let me just get to that. Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, the 54th. Yeah, there is something very significant again mentioned here about them. Among these branches, Rupa and Sanatana were principal, Anupama, Jiva Goswami and others headed by Rajendra were there some branches. By the will of the Supreme Gardener, the branches of Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami grew many times over, expanding throughout the Western countries. A specific reference is made to Western countries that Rupa and Sanatana Goswami grew towards in that direction. That's the westward branch of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's tree. Expanding throughout the Western countries and covering the entire region, expanding to the borders of the river Sindhu and the Himalayan mountain valleys, They expanded throughout India, including all the places of pilgrimage such as Vrindavan, Mathura, and Haridwar. The fruits of love of God, thus, which fructified on these two branches, were distributed in abundance. Tasting these fruits, everyone became mad after them. And people in general, on the western side of India, it says here, but we could extend it even further, were neither intelligent nor well behaved. But by the influence of Srila Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, they were trained in devotional service and good behavior. So, as we know from Srila Prabhupada's own history, when he was preparing himself for his mission in Vrindavan, he was engaged in very deep bhajan and devotional service. He was also compiling his books. And a significant incident happened that Srila Prabhupada revealed to some of his confidential associates in Vrindavan, and later on was relayed to us, is that Srila Prabhupada would every night when he was staying at Radha Damodar Temple, every night he was heard by local residents as sweeping the courtyard of Rupa and Sanatana Goswami's Rupa Goswami's Samadhi and Bhajan Kutir, the courtyard of Radha Damodar Temple, which is considered to be the hub, center of the spiritual world. Every night he would sweep the courtyard with tears in his eyes, praying to Sri Rupa and Sri Sanatana Goswami for their mercy. And one day, as he told confidentially to one of his associates in Vrindavan, he saw Rupa and Sanatana, and also with them came a younger figure, Jiva Goswami, all effulgent. They came out of Rupa Goswami's Samadhi, and they blessed Srila Prabhupada by saying, whatever you do, whatever you write will be empowered by us, will be perfect, and we will be with you. Your mission will be a success. Don't worry, go ahead. Like that. So Prabhupada's purpose, the principles of devotional service that he gave, and also his devotees that he empowered, they are the receptacles of this mercy and the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his close associates. So we shouldn't be bewildered by the external apparent simplicity of this process. It's potent, it's how would I say that? It's transformative. What we see in this world, we might not see the immediate effect of our preaching, even though when we distribute prasadam and the whole name of the books, we always run into people who become transformed immediately on the spot, just by getting in touch with these three potent receptacles of Lord Chaitanya's and Srila Prabhupada's mercy. But the changes that our movement affects in this world are kind of tectonic. You know, in geology you have these huge tectonic plates. I guess Australia is sitting on top of one of them. And they gradually float, move around at a very slow pace, very slow speed, but their movements are irreversible. You cannot stop them. And at the junctions of these plates you have eruptions, earthquakes, and different geological formations. In the same way, what Srila Prabhupada has set in motion by coming to the West is on the same level, the same caliber of tectonic changes in the world. And Rameshwara Prabhu, when he described the Chaitanya Charitamrita ecstatically, and then he also explained, he gave us a very interesting, shared with us an interesting conversation he had with Srila Prabhupada. It was 1977, and Srila Prabhupada was winding down his pastimes in this world. And they were on a train. Probably that conversation was never recorded, but they were on a train from, I believe, Mumbai to Delhi or somewhere. And Rameshwar Prabhu asked Prabhupada questions. Srila Prabhupada, he said, how will this world change? How will that golden age that you are talking about will start? How will the minds of people change? Because they were very impatient and young, and they were thinking, I was told by one Prabhupada's disciple, that they were already allocating portfolios in the government. Okay, you'll be the Minister of Finance, and you'll be the Home Minister. We'll come to power and we'll change this country or this world by actually becoming the government. Well, guess what? It hasn't happened yet. So Rameshwara Prabhu was asking Srila Prabhupada, how will that happen? Will it come by a sort of revolution and upheaval in the society? Srila Prabhupada smiles, no. It's not going to happen like that. You continue preaching, and your preaching will gradually trickle down. It will permeate the social fabric. And gradually people's values, their minds, their attitudes, their aspirations, their principles will change. They will gradually start being attracted to such things as yoga, vegetarianism, Ayurveda. Does it sound familiar? Organic farming? Does it sound familiar? Guess what? We ended up here, right? And gradually, these people will change to such an extent, and the number of these people will increase to such an extent that they will tell the politicians, if you want us to vote for you, you must be like that. And they won't have any other choice. That's how Prabhupada explained it. And he also explained that as you preach, people get in touch, even occasionally or in passing, they get in touch with devotees, they take birth again, and they gradually progress to a position, to a state at which they could actually take the devotional service full-heartedly and deliberately. So these changes are effected gradually, and this is how this tree of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu grows through Srila Prabhupada's movement. Srila Prabhupada refers to ISKCON in one of his commentaries on this chapter. He refers to ISKCON as one significant branch of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's tree. But he didn't say that in the commentary, but we could say that for him that this is the most important and the most significant, size-wise, the most significant branch of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's tree. And this tree of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also a very interesting tree. Sometimes it appears to be completely extinct, like for a very long time. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's parampara was all but gone, right? It was taken over by some unauthorized Vaishnava schools and Apasampradayas. But then, before we knew it sprouted again. And I was passing by those trees trimmed by Mahamantra Prabhu. They look like stumps. But that's what Lord Chaitanya, why did he do that? To rejuvenate the trees and give them more energy, to spread even further and give even sweeter fruits. Sometimes Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu trims or prunes his tree to make him grow faster and stronger. And this tree is very interesting. It's described by Kavi Karnapur that this tree is rooted in Madhavendra Puri. Madhavendra Puri is the root of this tree, from which the tree sprouted. It became its trunk, and then they have main branches like Advaita Acharya and Nityananda Prabhu, and there are many innumerable leaves and branches and flowers, and they reach the shell of the universe and penetrate that shell and grow in the spiritual world, into the spiritual world. And there, the foliage, the trees and the leaves and the branches and the flowers, they intertwine and they create a very nice canopy, a resting place for two transcendental birds, Shri Radha and Krishna, to have their pastimes there. And then the same foliage of the tree in the spiritual world casts a shadow here, and that shade serves as shelter for unlimited living entities of this material world. And Srila Prabhupada gave us a very significant role to play in this movement. Every one of us could contribute in some very significant way and earn Srila Prabhupada's direct and unlimited mercy. As he, again, in his commentaries, described devotees that joined the movement. He says that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's devotees were all liberated souls, Nitya Siddhas. Was it Gauranga Bhakta Gane? Nitya Siddha Karimani. That Lord Chaitanya's associates were all liberated souls. They came with him from the spiritual world together. They're so empowered that each one of them can liberate unlimited universes. And when they chant and dance, when they dance, their feet liberate the lower planetary systems, and their hands raised up in air liberate the higher planetary systems. Now, we may consider it to be a little bit of an exaggeration and self-flattery, but that's the words of the Shastra, right? And Srila Prabhupada says, we shouldn't think that liberated souls were in the past, those who accompanied Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Even now, whoever takes part in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Sankirtana mission is a Nitya Siddha devotee. as long as he or she are participating in this movement. So this liberation is something very easily obtained by this world, and by participating in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. And Srila Prabhupada, as he says here in this commentary, in the future, the names of Europeans, Americans, Canadians, Australians, South Americans, Asians, etc. will be celebrated as just like the devotees in the past were celebrated in Chaitanya Charitamrita here. In the future edition of Chaitanya Charitamrita, who knows, some of the names of the devotees present here will be celebrated as well. And there are specific services to Lord Chaitanya will be described. Yes, and Srila Prabhupada, I started saying that, but I didn't finish. Srila Prabhupada said to Tamal Krishna Maharaj that Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is such a wonderful book, even if you don't accept Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is God. If people just read this book and enjoy and relish the wonderful relationship, the wonderful exchange between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees, they'll become devotees, because they will feel like having these relationships as well. They would like to be part of that community of devotees. So this is the most powerful and the most easily understandable preaching technique or preaching argument that we have. Besides prasadam, besides the holy name, besides Srila Prabhupada's books, on top of that are the qualities of his devotees. I don't know about you, but when I joined, and again I joined, not that I planned to join, I didn't plan. I just ran into a devotee. I didn't even know who he was, and he looked a little bit strange to me. And he spoke strange things, and he gave me a strange piece of something that I ate. And I still remember the taste of that. It's wonderful, something porfi. I still remember the taste of that. Already 30 plus years passed. And I was completely mesmerized by his qualities. I had never met anyone like that in my life. Why? The most striking quality in him was he was completely selfless. He didn't need anything from me. He was so content. He was so happy that when I was associating with him, I talked with him, I couldn't help but wanting to be like him, or at least somewhere around him. So that's what Srila Prabhupada expects of his devotees and his followers, to emulate not just his preaching techniques, but also his wonderful qualities that won over the hearts of millions and continue to do so through those who he empowers. So this is how this tree grows, and we are in for more nectar in the 10th chapter, describing other devotees of Lord Chaitanya and Jagannath Puri. Thank you so much for all your patience and attention, and I don't think we have any time for questions. Do we? 5 minutes? Okay. Yeah, see, we don't have time for questions. See, they listen to the first part of this discussion, that the most essential lesson from Chaitanya Charitamrita is a lot of eating. So please don't feel obliged to stay. You can go and take prasad. That's it. I don't think there are any questions. No questions. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantaraj Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai. Samalita Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaura Premananda. No questions.